Sanctuary. It's a bit of a churchy word. Sometimes I eschew churchy words because there are less people who are in the church than who are actually in the church. And yet, sometimes only a churchy word will do. There's certain words that we use here in the church that people outside of the church just simply won't understand. For example, narthex. You ask somebody what that means outside of the church, and they'll probably tell you, I think it's that unicorn of the sea, the narwhal, hymn versus song, etc., etc. You get the idea. But sometimes there are some church words where there is simply no substitute at all. And I think that sanctuary might be one of those words. But we get confused about what it actually means. You see, this is the sanctuary in which we are located now, but some people call this the church, and I get it. This is what we think of whenever we think of church, but some people also call the entire building the church. So that's a little bit confusing. And in reality, the church is the people, whether or not we are gathered in this particular building. So before we go any further and get any more confused, it might be helpful to just simply define sanctuary. If you were to open up a dictionary and look to the very first entry, what you would see is that it's defined as a place of refuge or safety. It developed out of the medieval church's policy that fugitives were immune whenever they were inside of a church building. And you've got to go a little bit further down the list to see a definition of sanctuary that has to do with a specifically religious space. But the idea of sanctuary also calls to mind the psalm, God is our refuge and strength, a help always near in times of great trouble. God is our strength. God is our safety. God is always near us whenever we truly need sanctuary. But it also calls to mind the imagery from the Christmas story, the detail that we've been talking about for several weeks now, that there was no room for them in the inn. There was no room for the Holy Family of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus in the inn. It's a familiar detail of the Christmas story, specifically of the birth of Christ. But did you know that it doesn't end there? You see, a young family gives birth, but the joy of that birth is short-lived because they need to get out of there. They are in fear of their lives because there is an evil ruler who has threatened to kill every young child. They are not safe. No, not even in their hometown. In fact, not even in their home country can they find safety. So they go to a neighboring country to wait it out, to seek safety, to seek a sense of sanctuary. And they eke out a belonging while they are there. Eventually, they do, in fact, return to the land that they love. Do you know this story? I know that it could describe many modern people. I know that it could describe people from Ukraine. I know that it could describe people from Afghanistan. I know that it could describe people from Venezuela. And yes, I wrote this message 2 weeks ago before any sort of current events. But this is not the story of any modern people, certainly not any modern people fleeing to Europe or to America. This is the story of an ancient family, a holy family, one who gave birth to God in the flesh, but they can't even enjoy that because they've got to get out. You know this story. This is the story that Cindy Bell just read to us from Matthew chapter 2. This is a story that we, like the Magi, are so quick to worship that little baby, but sometimes so apprehensive to welcome him into our homes. See, that's the story, that's the Christmas story according to Matthew. If you want quiet Christmas, turn to Luke. Don't open up Matthew. See, in Luke, there's no room for them, but, there's angels and there's animals and everybody seems to be enjoying themselves and it's very nice. and it's quaint, and somehow we write Christmas carols about it's snowing there. I don't know, but it's very cute, right? That's the Christmas story according to Luke. Matthew tells it in a different way. Matthew doesn't waste any ink on the birth. And in Matthew, it's all, he's here, now he's got to go. Now he's got to flee for his life because he is unsafe. That's the Christmas story according to Matthew. And look, by definition today, Jesus would probably be called a refugee. He is seeking safety from political violence in another land. While it's true that both Egypt and Israel, Palestine were under Roman occupation at that time, he's going to a place with strange customs, with different practices, with a different language being spoken, and even he would be in the religious minority as someone who went to Egypt. And so the point of the Christmas story is not to necessarily come up with a policy or anything like that, but to bring us to the place of seeing the weakness, the fragility, the humility in our newborn King. And as we do so, we work so hard for a world where there is room for all, inspired by the Christmas story, inspired by the entrance of King Jesus into this world. No safety, no security for him. We work for a world where there is truly, really truly room for all. I like the way that biblical scholar, theologian Walter Brueggemann puts it in his Lenten devotional. Lent's close, you know. The unafraid are open to the neighbor, while the frightened are defending themselves from the neighbor. The unafraid are generous in the community, while the frightened, in their anxiety, must keep and store and accumulate to make themselves safe. The unafraid commit acts of compassion and mercy, while the frightened do not notice those indeed. The unafraid are committed to justice for the weak and the poor, while the frightened see them only as threats. The unafraid pray in the morning, care through the day, and rejoice at night in thanks and praise, while the frightened are endlessly restless and dissatisfied. Friends, if you are still looking for a New Year's resolution, I hope that you will consider being unafraid. If you're still trying to figure out who you are going to be in this new year, try to be merciful. And if you are still participating in one last gift exchange, my encouragement to you is to exchange apathy for care.